My name is Vaisesika. You can call me Vaish, V-A-I-S-H. We live in a house in California, and we have a community out there, much like what is here in New York City, where people who are interested in spiritual practice come together on a regular basis, and we like it. So we are retired. We travel a lot, and we go to various communities like this and others around the world. My wife's getting ready to head up somewhere in New York. I'm going to UK tomorrow and then on to Italy, and then I'll meet her in the UK in a couple of weeks or something. And we find and have found throughout our lives in the way we've grown up and then had joined this spiritual movement called the Krishna Consciousness Movement, that it's something that enriches our lives. My story is that I started when I was around in kindergarten asking why I had to die. And the answers weren't satisfactory to me. And especially after I was in first grade and our president was assassinated. None of you were alive at that time probably, but it was President Kennedy. And then I had an uneasy feeling that the material, I'd taken a wrong turn to get and ended up here in a place that was precarious. And throughout my life I had that sort of queasy feeling about this lifetime being tenuous. I wasn't helped much more in high school. One of my best friends, top athlete, had disappeared in the wilderness, never to be found again. And around that time there was an environment in America where people were taking time to find themselves. You can hear it in the music from that era, 60s and early 70s. There's a sort of a romantic period there where people are looking more into themselves and why they exist and what's the purpose of life in the classical romantic sense. And when I was in high school, had come in contact with a book that I read. It's called Be Here Now by Ram Dass, and it was my first introduction to the philosophy of the East. And that book opened my mind to the fact that there had been great thinkers throughout the ages that had pondered the same questions and were concerned about the same issues I was, about what's the purpose of life and so forth. And as is the prerogative of any red-blooded teenager in the world, I leaned into it very heavily and became fully dedicated to a spiritual search when I was in my junior year of high school. So much so that people thought that I had gone mad, because I was doing some pretty extreme things. To decided I wouldn't ride in cars anymore, or look at clocks, or look in a mirror, because all these things were self-centering. And I did go to school, but they had to wear flip-flops there, and take it out and wear no shoes. These types of things were eclectic. I read in various books about austerities and meditation and was trying everything. And then one day, when I was doing my practice at home, I didn't meet, but a friend of mine from high school had received a magazine called Back to Godhead, which contained the very straightforward philosophy of the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How many here have heard of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Please raise your hand. Okay. The movement that we have, the spiritual movement, which is international, it's called the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is based on the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he gave very profound philosophical points, but a very simple application. Oftentimes we find profound philosophy, but there's no on-ramp. It sounds good, but where am I going to enter? How am I going to practice in my current situation? Well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was considered at the time a great mystic and a great teacher. He had many followers at a certain point of his life, and the ancient wisdom literatures say that he was an avatar, or an appearance of God in the world to teach a particular process of self-realization called the Yuga Dharma. Everyone please say Yuga Dharma. You've heard of Dharma before, right? Dharma means to be aligned in your constitutional position, to do the thing that's specially meant for you, to reach your highest potential in life. And Yuga means a particular era that we're in. And I'll refer to the ancient wisdom literatures, as there's a body of literatures that are specifically dedicated to us reaching our full potential as spiritual beings. So I call those the wisdom literatures, because it sounds very non-sectarian, doesn't it? And we all like non-sectarian things, right? Say yes. Yes. Okay. Came to the right place. So, in his teachings, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that there was a particular practice of spiritual practice that one could apply best in each era called a yuga. And that would be called the Yuga Dharma. And in the present age, the article that I read in this magazine talked about the Kali Yuga. That's the period of time we're in now. There's a great opportunity at this particular time to take advantage of a spiritual practice that has to do with mantra. Mantra is a combination of sounds, syllables, which make sounds, and those are non-material. And by practicing the mantra, by saying it yourself, fortunately, when you get a human body, normally you get thrown in for free a tongue. Check and see if it's still there. Is it? And free set of ears thrown in on the side here that are perfectly convoluted to catch the sound that comes from your tongue. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, these are the two instruments that you can use to practice this kind of yoga. And the mantra meditation then will elevate the consciousness. So I looked into it more, and I saw that there were lots of young people like me who were practicing at the time, and everyone gets attracted to their peers doing great. And I saw in the magazine that there were lots of people my age who were doing lots of things, not just sitting meditating, but there was one picture of a group of young people who were working on a printing press, printing spiritual books. And there was another group that was out feeding people. And when I read the article, I saw that it was not any kind of food, but it was a special kind of food. They were advocating that if you eat spiritual food, then you'll purify your mind. And it's a kind of yoga to eat. That made sense to me because I always questioned the kinds of diet that I grew up with. And when I was 14, I had become a vegetarian on my own because it just seemed barbaric to me at a certain point to harm animals. So to eat. So then this was another a step above that, which was food that was spiritualized, not just vegetarian. And all of the practices that I read about seemed accommodating to anybody. Anybody could do them. You didn't have to change your style, although I did. And that is, I had really long hair, but then I cut it all off. It wasn't required, but I did it because I really wanted to take full advantage of the practice as much as possible. And I was able to then move into an ashram. And an ashram means a place where you can really focus on practicing. However, in the teaching of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you don't have to move into an ashram. You can live anywhere and spiritualize your environment. And take up a few simple practices in your home that will transform your life. Much the way a whole pot of milk gets transformed when you put in a little bit of yogurt. Anybody here know how to make yogurt?
Yes.
Okay, tonight's a cooking class thrown in for free. You can thank me later. So, if you have a large pot of milk and you take a dollop of yogurt and you add it to the milk and put the milk in a warm environment, not too hot, not too cold, just warm, and you cover it, and you come back in the morning, you'll find that the whole pot has turned to yogurt. So in a similar way, the way the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu unfolded in my life was that anyone could add some of the practices to their life, and then their whole life could be spiritualized. And that was a concept that rang true to me when I heard my teacher, who would become my teacher, who represented Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, talk about an iron rod. And he said, if you take an iron rod and you put it in fire and you leave it there, and you come back later, the iron rod will transform and it will no longer be iron, but it will be, and this is for 20 points, fill in the blank. The iron rod transforms into
Fire.
Okay, Divyangi said it first. 20 points. For Divyangi, she's ahead. It's a material element. It's hard, but becomes transformed in association with fire and becomes fire. And in a similar way, he taught, based on, that is my teacher, based on the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who taught 500 years ago, the simple system of bhakti, was that if you add a few practices to your life, it becomes like a spiritual fire in your life. And then all the so-called material things that we have become purposeful, and they become fire-like. And he went on to say that there's nothing that can't be used. I had a thought in the beginning that I'd have to renounce the world to become spiritual. Have any of you had that thought before? It makes sense in some ways, because there's a way in which material life can get so complicated, and we might come to a conclusion that it's a disadvantageous situation to be involved with material things. Mightn't we think like that?
Yes.
At some point? Any songs about that? Like people talking about how, somebody drove off with their pickup truck, and there's the whole genre singing the blues. Wasn't for bad luck. I couldn't get any luck at all. So there's a way in which the material world can seem out of balance, very difficult to deal with. And I might conclude that let me just create a void. So I'll give you a logical demonstration of the way Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught. And it involves a number line. Did anybody work with number lines in school? Okay, number line is a long line. It'll have an arrow on one end and an arrow on the other end. What does that mean when there's an arrow on the end of the line? It goes on for ever. This way or that way. Is that clear so far, right? And then it has integers, points along the line. This is now coming back. And then what's in the middle? Dead center? Zero. Everyone say 0 for 20 points.
Zero.
Okay, so she's still ahead there. 40, 20, everybody. Okay, so there's a negative side on the left side of 0, and there's a positive side on the right side of 0. Now, what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained is that there's actually 3 paths. It's not just binary on, off, but there's 3 paths. So one of them is material life. And has anybody heard of the term karma?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, what does it mean to you? You say. Yes, please.
What you put out, you get back.
Okay, what you put out, you get back. Can you elaborate a little more? Like, if you put out...
Whatever actions you act upon will return back onto you the same way you do to others.
That's a nice definition. Thank you. It's very helpful. There's a way in which there's a kind of justice in the universe that has this sound. Everyone gets what he or she deserves. Does that sound good? It depends how you've been acting. One thing's for sure, that when we take, we have to give something back. When you have a credit card and you go around and you spend on it, you may feel very wealthy for a little while. Buy yourself a few new shirts and I don't know what else you want. Handbag or something. Some new glasses, I don't know. And you feel, oh yeah, I'm living the high life. I don't know if that would be the high life with 3 shirts, but anyway, you got some new stuff. So you feel a little bit good about yourself, but then what happens after that? Remember, it's a credit card. You get a bill. I don't know if they come in the mail anymore. Do they? Yeah, they come in the mail. They call them window letters. It's like, oh yeah, I got to pay back. I forgot. I forgot I bought that last month before. But when you open it, it's like, oh, there's a reminder. I have to pay for what I bought. So, what happens? You can get in more and more debt, right? Say yes.
Yeah.
That's good. So, I mean, it's not good, but I'm saying that. Good answer. So, the more you spend, the more the numbers go up. But what kind of numbers are they? Say negative. Okay, she's tied with Yukon, 40, 20, everybody else. So, negative numbers. So, it looks like I'm making progress, but actually I'm getting more into debt. And this is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said is karma. I'm living at the expense of others. For instance, in this world, in order to live, you have to live at the cost of somebody else, whether it's plants, or animals, or just to have your existence. You take up the space wherever you may live, where other living entities live. And therefore, the ancient wisdom literatures that I mentioned talk about how one living being is food for another in this world. And it's a world of karma, it's a world of debt. So always trying to get out of debt here. Anybody with a student loan? Student loans here? Let's give a shout out to everybody with student loans. That seems to go on forever. And that's a problem because there's compounded interest on the loans and so forth. And I get in so much debt that it's impossible for me to dig myself out. Now, what happens then? I feel frustrated. And then I come up with an idea that I will move up the number line and I will come to 0. And that's a little relief from the debt, isn't it? What do you think?
Yes.
It is. It's a little relief from the debt, but 0 is 0 after all, isn't it? And 0 is no kind of life for us because we're conscious beings. And conscious beings really do want to have fun. We seek pleasure. This is one of the tenets of the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're alive. We're not dead. And we can't annihilate our existence either. So the idea of coming to 0, although it may seem convenient when I'm suffering and I'm in debt and it seems like I can't get out of it, it's not a place that we can stay. And it's not something that will satisfy us. There is a sense of relief, just as if somebody's chasing you and you dart into a door and then you find a broom closet and slam the door, they're still out there. You gotta come out sometime. You've got a temporary reprieve. And so the idea of a philosophical system where I take away myself and say that I don't really exist, it's untenable. Because at some point, my tendency to enjoy the world will come back. And have you ever done something where you said, I'll never do this again? Have you ever said that?
Yes.
Okay, about 1/3 of you. Have you ever, after you said that, a while later, I mean, it could be 24-hour cycle, it could be a year, whatever it might be, you find yourself doing it again?
Yes.
Yeah. And this tendency comes from the fact that we're conscious. We're conscious and we seek variety, we seek pleasure. And we can't be satisfied with zero. We can't be satisfied with becoming nothing or merging into a homogeneous oneness where we lose our identity. It's not satisfying. This is the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I had thought that if I just gave up everything, and I did, I dragged all my stuff out of my room. I lived with my parents this was around when I was 16 years old. And I said, I'm getting rid of everything except one blanket. Because in the book I read, I saw this holy man, and all he had was a blanket. I said, that's what I'm keeping. Of course, I had to walk to school and wear jeans and and a shirt, but I said, that's all I'm keeping, just one blanket. Everything else must go. And this is a reaction to the debt of the material world and the trouble that it causes. So then I think, let me just get rid of everything. And you can take it a step further. There are philosophical systems which say, just become nothing. You are nothing. But when your mom passes away, and you go to somebody for some solace, and they say, well, your mom actually never existed. And now she's literally nothing. How do you feel about that? Does that sound satisfying to you? There is a sense of attachment we have to people, to things, to relationships that is indelible. It's not something that we can just slough off and say it doesn't exist anymore. We have that tendency because we're conscious beings. And conscious beings are called sentient beings. Sentient means we're sensitive. We have feelings. And we always have had feelings, we always will have feelings. They're just being projected through the particular body that I'm in at a time when I'm in the material world. So what to do? I'm in negative numbers, now I've come up to 0. I'm locked in the broom closet, somebody's waiting for me when I get out, creditors are calling. What do you do now? That's what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talked about. He said, there's a positive experience for the conscious being. And he described it as starting with a kind of practice called Bhakti Yoga. And in Bhakti Yoga, there is an application of our senses and our mind to the positive forms of the spiritual world. Now, where would that be on the number line? There's only got one way to go here. Yeah, that's right, okay. You scored, I know, you were trying to score. Okay, 60 points. Now, you're up in the positive numbers now. And this is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught as a life of happiness, is use everything that you have. We have things, right? Anybody here have any things?
Yes.
Only one person has things. You got your hat, that's it, right? And your student loan to pay off. So we all have things. But try to digest this sentence. What we are is more important than what we have. I'll say it, please repeat. What we are is more important than what we have. We all have things. Now, my next question is, what percentage of those things do we get to keep? I'll give you a few options. 40% of the things you get to keep permanently. 60? 20? 10? 1%?
0.
Who said 0? Another 20 points. You're up there at 40 now.
Maybe we can fill in that section over there.
Yeah, there's a positive numbers up here you can move in. You gave the correct answer. The things that we have, of the things we have, we get to keep 0%. So what's it all for? Why do we have things in the first place? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, they're all to be used in service. And when we use in service, then to the Supreme, and this is what's called Bhakti Yoga. Everyone say Bhakti Yoga. When you use things in the service of the Supreme, then they become spiritualized like that iron rod that I described earlier, that becomes fire-like. And there's another example that my teacher gave that made me understand this concept that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had propounded many years ago. And then he talked about a tiny little screw. And a tiny little screw, when it's connected to the machine that it was made for, is extremely valuable. But when it falls out, and you find it on Schermerhorn, when you're walking across the street, and something sticks to your shoes, and you look and you find a tiny little screw, you can't sell it on eBay. And nobody else will want it. It's just a forlorn, lost little screw out in the middle of Schermerhorn. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, we're like that. We're extremely valuable when we're connected in the positive numbers and we're using our things in service. So on the negative side of the number line, I'm incurring debt because I'm doing things and I'm using things for myself. And I'm trying to enrich myself. Then when I get frustrated, I move up to 0 and I say, I'm getting rid of everything. But I can't stay at 0. We already established that. We agreed on it. We voted. It's a democracy in here. And then we talked about how that position of 0 is untenable, but we can move into the positive numbers by utilizing whatever we have in service. And the best way to perform service, I mean, service sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, yes. Everybody said yes.
Yes.
In fact, there was a survey of about 150,000 students in Canada, and they were all asked the same question: is it better to give or receive? And what do you think they said? Is it more noble? Is it better to give or receive?
Give.
Most of them said, like 95%. I don't know who the other 5 were, but they said it's better to give. There's something intuitive about that giving is good when I'm giving for the right purpose. And this is the idea of service. It's natural to us because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, this is our nature. This is our dharma to serve. And we talked about dharma. Dharma, we have an individual dharma, and when we use our things, including, now this is a revolutionary concept I'm about to bring up, so don't freak out. Promise?
Yes.
Okay, there's an extra room over on the side for freakouts. And we'll escort you over there. That's why Gopal Champu's sitting out there. When people freak out when they hear these philosophical points, he takes you into the room, lets you calm down, give you a cool drink of water. Your body and mind are things. They're not you. The body is a biological robot. Move your arm like this. Feel your elbow. There's a little lever in there, right? It's helping it. There's tendons, there's muscles, and all you're doing is thinking about it. So there's software in your mind, and it's saying, pull the arm up to the right, a little further this way, a little further that way, and it just goes. It's uncanny how well aligned the whole body is. But if you examine it carefully, now think of your heart for a minute. When's the last time you thanked your heart, by the way? Anybody thank your heart? I took a nap. I take a 20-minute nap. 19 minutes in. 59 seconds actually, because by the time I touch my watch, it's already 19 minutes and 59 seconds. So a 19-minute and 59-second nap. And my brain shuts off for a minute. It's like restart on your computer, right? And then when I was coming back, from a sleeping state. I was lying on my left side, and I became acutely aware of my heart, and it was pumping. And then I thought, how is it pumping? And then I thought, hey, heart, thank you. Because I've never really thanked you, ever. You've been doing this for a long time. So I had a conversation with my heart, and I said, my dear heart, I really appreciate what you're doing for me, and I'd like to thank you. And my heart answered me. You want to hear what he said? He said, well, you're welcome, sir, but it's not my choice. And when I'm asked to stop, I'm just going to stop. I can't say when that's going to be, and I'm just doing my duty for you, for as long as I'm asked to do. So when I put my feet on the floor, about to stand up, I thought, I better take my life seriously. And there's a way in which, in any spiritual practice, one of the basic tenets is to become aware of the fact that I'm different from my body and mind. I can become the observer of my body and mind. I'm not my body, nor am I mind. The elements of the body are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, which means space, mind, intelligence, which is more subtle than the mind, and false ego. And then there's the next statement which says, then the statement comes from Krishna. He spoke as the teacher in the Bhagavad Gita to a student, Arjuna, that besides these elements, there's a higher energy. And guess what that higher energy is? For another 20 points.
Krishna? Soul.
Close. Who said soul? He's in the game now. 20 points over here. Okay, so that puts you at 40, right? So it's the soul. Your answer is unassailable, actually. It's unassailable, but there's a slight detail here. We're part of Krishna. Just as when you have a big fire and there's a spark and the fire are the same quality, but the quantity is different. Or if you have the sun and a ray of the sun, when the ray comes into the room, you say, there's the sun. But if it was the sun, then we would be vaporized. So it is Krishna, but it's actually, we're part of Krishna. So what he says is, the superior part of this world, the most interesting part by far, in fact, there wouldn't be anybody to be interested unless you were here, is you. The most amazing part of the world is you. And who are you? You're not your body, but you're what animates the body. You're the consciousness, the conscious entity within the body. And when you finish this biological mechanical robot, when it expires, then you leave this body, and according to the consciousness that you have cultivated in your life, you get a new one in your next life. It's an accommodation by the material nature. We get it automatically by the force of our own consciousness. So there's a way in which our body and our mind are things. So based on the theory I gave you earlier, the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that what we have is not as important as what we are. What would you say the body as a thing, the way I'm putting in this context, what could you do with it, the body and the mind, in order to be on the positive side of the number line? And based on the idea of, well, this is going to give it away, so I'm going to have to lower the points. Based on the idea of service, what could you do with your body and mind? Create, use it in, we'll accept your answer. Creative service, yes. So this is the simple teaching of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We have a body and mind, you don't have to give it up. But it's a thing, and you can use it in service. And as it turns out, when you use your body and mind in service to the Supreme, then your whole body transforms. And your mind transforms also. What's the example I gave earlier, and actually I gave it twice, that explains, it's a thought bridge, a metaphor, that describes how something gets transformed from one state to another.
Fire.
Fire and?
Iron.
Okay, milk yogurt, I gave that example, 20 points. And
Fire.
fire and?
Iron.
Iron turns into?
Fire.
By contact with fire. So here's one of the formulas that come from the Bhagavad Gita that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught everybody. You can transform everything you have, including your body and mind, and change it from material to spiritual by engaging it in service to the Supreme. And he said that you can do that with anything. Anything that you have, you can transform its nature by using it in service to the Supreme. Then it no longer has the same nature, which is dense and dark, but it becomes full of light, becomes bright, and spiritualized. So it's a very simple system that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught, and it's based on the idea that we are spiritual beings, but we're temporarily within a material body. And when we use our body and our mind in service to the Supreme, then they all become spiritualized. We transform our consciousness, and we're no longer obligated to take on gross material bodies, but we can attain a spiritual body, even in our next life, or even in this life, by using everything in service to the Supreme. Some of the byproducts are, that have been reported consistently, those who use their bodies and minds in service to the Supreme are happier. They're more joyful about their life. Why would you think that would be? Because it seems to me that, at least the way I was raised, that the more things you have, that you put the more of those storage lockers that you have, what are they? Extra storage? Do they have that in New York? If stuff doesn't fit in your house or apartment, you get a storage locker, right?
Yes.
So the person who has more of those with more stuff put in it is happier than most people, right? Because they have more stuff. You have to work with me on this. They're happier, right?
Yeah, they're
No,
happier.
Vaisesika Das. Wrong, bad. Not necessarily. It doesn't matter how many things you have. If I don't engage them in service to the Supreme, then they simply become a burden to me. And therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, anybody, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you don't have to give away anything. Whatever situation you're in because of your previous activities, as you explained, goes around, comes around, you get certain kinds of facilities in this life. It doesn't matter if you have fewer facilities or more. Whatever facility you have now, if you engage it in service to the Supreme, it becomes transformed and spiritualized. And there's a sense of happiness in the transformation that one has in one's life. And one becomes more and more aware of the fact that what we are is more important than what we have. After all, whatever we have, we'll lose at some point. And one of the concepts that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emphasized was, we have an opportunity to use what we have now, especially this body, only for a limited amount of time. It's a limited time offer. And if you're smart enough to use it while you have it, before you lose it, then you get full credit. Now I'm going to tell you a joke that explains this principle. May I?
Yes.
Permission to tell a joke?
Yes.
Okay. Only half of you said yes, so the rest of you have to cover your ears. And when you see everyone else laughing, don't blame me. Okay. So, there's plenty of room over here, space here. Please welcome, make yourselves at home. These two guys are walking down the street. I'm not going to say New York, because New York's a nice place and nobody ever gets robbed here, right? So let's just say it was in Idaho. And they're walking down the street. Robert steps out from the alleyway. And he has a gun. And he said, okay, you both give me everything you have, all your money. And they have their hands in the air. And the two are friends. So one of the friends says to the Robert, hold it 1 second, pulls out his wallet. He says, I have to do one thing. He turns to his friend, Dave, and he says, Dave, here's the $20 I owe you. Go ahead. So there's a way in which everything will be taken from us. Unceremoniously, by the way. Have you ever had anything taken from you unceremoniously? You thought it was yours, and all of a sudden, it's like, what do you mean? It's gone. If you have a lot of money, I hate to break this to you, if you have a lot of money, somebody's going to come for it. One of your relatives, most likely. It's like, you know, cousin Sanjay needs a transplant, and you're the only one in the family that has money, so you're going to have to pay for it, right? Does that sound familiar? You know, whatever it is, somebody's going to take whatever resources we have now. So the wise thing to do is based on a doctrine called, you want to hear a doctrine?
Yes.
We're getting serious here, right? Doctrine called preemptive giving. Preemptive giving means you give it in service to the Supreme before it's unceremoniously taken from you. Now here's a quiz, and if you score well on this, you get 1,600 on your SAT. So, when something's taken from you unceremoniously, do you get credit for it?
No.
No credit, it's just gone, right? But if before it's unceremoniously taken from you, you give it to a good cause, do you get credit?
Yes.
So this is the doctrine of preemptive giving. It's those who are wise and realize that there's a shelf life on this particular body and mind that I have, and all the stuff I have, whatever things I have now, I only have them in my grasp temporarily. But if I can use them for a higher cause before they're wrested away from my hands, then I get full credit. If they're taken away from me, if I keep holding on to them and I don't use them in service, and then they're just unceremoniously taken, 0. I'm just like everybody else, hapless. I've lost it. I'm sad about it. And everybody else is sad, walking around thinking, either all my stuff was taken or it's going to be taken. So there's an answer to use it in service. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave this very simple formula for a happy life, which is quite alarming when I tell you. And that is that the Supreme is conscious. Just as we're conscious, the Supreme is conscious and sentient, which means the Supreme has feelings. We also have a relationship with the Supreme. And when we offer the things that we have now, including our body and mind, to the Supreme, there's an intense feeling of happiness that comes from that. Not just because of the relief that I gave it for a good cause before it was taken from me, but also because there's a reciprocation. Have you ever given someone a gift without any strings attached? You just really cared for that person and you were very thoughtful and you went and got the right thing. My sister used to do that. She passed away a few years ago. I really liked her. She was one of the nicest people I ever met. And she gave the best gifts. She always thought about what she was going to give people. It was, people do that. They're so thoughtful. It's like, how did you know? And then the way she'd wrap it, everything was perfect, the way she did it. It was uncanny. And I always admired that. And so when somebody gives you a gift very thoughtfully out of love, how do you feel? We fall short with our words. Appreciative, it almost sounds paltry when we say it, right? I mean, we do feel all these things, but there's a way, it's like, how can I repay this?
Yeah.
There's a sense like, I want to express my appreciation, and it might even seem trivial to say tit for tat, so I'll give you something back. There's almost nothing we can give back when somebody gives us something out of love, right? So this was the next level of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preaching. He said there's different ways that we can give. And one of the ways, the lowest of the motivations, is out of fear. The next above that is called prospect. What am I going to get in return? Have you ever had anybody give you something, but you knew they wanted something back?
Yeah.
All the time, right? That's our whole society. You walk in a restaurant, oh, welcome, like, here's your $52 salad. And there's a sense that, everyone's being nice to me, but yeah, they just want my money, right? And that is not it's not satisfying, that kind of giving and receiving. But there's another level above that. That's called duty. I don't expect anything in return. Duty's amazing, isn't it? When somebody does their duty, in fact, if somebody, for instance, joins the military to protect their country, they let them on the airplane second, right after people who are disabled and in a wheelchair. Before all the, global services and 1K flyers, the people who are in the military, why do they honor the military? Because there's this idea, it's like, well, you're doing your duty for your country, right? It's a very high concept. When somebody does their duty, it's like, why are you doing it? You're not getting paid. I don't want to get paid. I'm doing it because it's the right thing. So that's a very high level of motivation. But there's an even higher level. But we can't tell you because you'll freak out. We'll have to have Gopal Champu take you to the freak out room. Right, Gopal? Everyone freaks out when they hear this. We shouldn't talk about it. Besides, the program's over. Let's all just go home and forget about it.
No!
Oh, all right. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, the highest level is called love. And it was said many years ago in a song that many of you probably heard, all you need is love. And if you think about that, it's what makes the world go round at the highest level. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described how there's a life of giving which isn't for prospect. You're not doing it out of fear because you've left the region of thinking that I'm threatened at every minute, because you understand you're not your body. It's called a kind of liberation when you understand that I never die. Even Socrates, he was asked to drink poison. He said, yeah, okay, no big deal. But when you move past duty and come into the realm of giving out of love, then you expand unlimitedly. Your heart expands, not physically, but emotionally. You become bigger and bigger by giving. That's counterintuitive, because on the negative side of the number line, I think the more I give, the less I have. Right? Don't we think that? Anybody ever give you a big sum of money and you already spent it in your head by the time it touched your hand? They give you $100 and you think, spent. Should have gave me 200, but if you gave me 200 as a spent, it's all gone. That's just the negative part of the number line. We can never get ahead. It's always not enough. But amazingly, on the other side of the number line, in this realm of spiritual involvement in giving to the Supreme, and therefore, as in the principle of watering the root of a tree and all the branches and leaves then becoming nourished, when you give to the Supreme, then all the parts of the Supreme, which is us and everybody else, and not just humans, but also animals and trees, and everybody becomes nourished by it. It's an amazing phenomena that one molecule of love expands into a universe, or many, many universes. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that you can live in an apartment and have that love. In fact, those who live in gigantic houses but they don't have love, they feel cramped. They can't stand the other person living in the other room. There's no love, right? But you live maybe in a tent even, and there's one other person that you love, it feels like the most spacious place in the world. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, if you live by this principle, anybody can do it. There's access, everyone has access to it because that's our nature, to give out of love to the Supreme. And that's what the practice is. It's universal. It's not a religion. It's a universal principle. And when you do that, then you feel naturally fulfilled immediately. You don't have to wait. Nobody has to fly in and give you a certificate and say, hey, you feel better now. You just know you do. It's so natural, and that's what spiritual practice should be. It should be so directly experienced by the person that they know for themselves. Just like this. When you're hungry and you eat food, and this is uncanny. I mean, it happens to me all the time. Do you know when you're eating food when you're full? Who said yes? How do you know? Abang?
You stop feeling hungry.
Stop feeling hungry. And you just know you're full. How do you know when you're hungry, too?
The stomach makes sounds.
It's Kaddish. I shouldn't ask these questions. Kaddish is a fasting day, so a lot of devotees are fasting. Yeah, I'm hungry. We know, it's intuitive. We know directly. So one of the examples that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave was from a book called the Srimad Bhagavatam. Fortunately, it's still around. It's beautiful poetry written about the philosophy of giving in love to the Supreme and all the different ways that you can integrate it into your life. And so he quoted this, and he said that just as when you eat food, there's three things that naturally happen. One is you notice that your hunger is going away. Another is you feel satisfied. And a third is that you feel nourished. He said in the same way, when you take up this process of spiritual giving out of love to the Supreme, then there's a way in which you naturally feel satisfied. Your hunger for accumulating more and more things for yourself just naturally goes away. Just like when somebody brings you more and you're not hungry anymore, say, no thanks. And you go, no, take more. Say, no thanks. You're full, you know, for yourself. And also you feel a nourishment that comes from that engagement. It satisfies the soul, as we say, and it really does. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that this simple process, it doesn't require wealth. You can live in the most humble dwelling, or you can be the wealthiest person with many, many things. But the principle is that if you dedicate them, this is a process of dedication to the Supreme, then you become naturally aligned in your dharma, which satisfies your soul, and you grow, and you become a bigger person. After all, who do we remember in history more? The despots who stole from people, or who oppressed them and lived at the cost of others? Or do we remember fondly the people who either out of duty or love gave their lives to help other people? Which would you say gets a better place in history?
The second.
Those who gave out of love. The second. Thank you. So it's almost like having subtitles. So this is a universal principle. It's not something from a religion book. It's natural consequence of being a soul and being connected to the Supreme, and we can feel it for ourselves, and the results are immediate and direct. No waiting required. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted that universal principle to be available to everyone in the world. He said, you don't have to change your religion. You don't have to change your hairstyle. You don't have to change your clothes. Whatever you're wearing now is fine, as long as it's something. And I come from San Francisco, so I have to put that caveat. Then nothing needed to be changed except for our intention. And when I change my intention and I say, I'm doing this for God, I'm giving out of love for God, then immediately we become aligned and we become happy and we become satisfied. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally went from door to door. He walked barefoot. He had taken monkhood when he was a young man, 24 years old, simply for the purpose of going and giving this message, not just the message, but also a simple application of it to people. He went door to door and just met people, and he would sit with the family for a little while, and he'd teach these basic principles that we just talked about now, and then he taught there are some very practical ways to apply it. So one of them, he said, was to, and I mentioned this earlier, to use our voice and our tongue and our ears to sing for God. Now this is another universal principle, because we living beings like music. In fact, I saw a bumper sticker once that said, "Life doesn't make sense without music." Have you ever seen that? Does it ring true to you? Imagine a world with no music. Okay, good. Thank you. So, music, rhythm, and so forth, they're a universal language. And then he said, use this universal language, but you add one element to it, which is spiritual. And that is a sound vibration that comes from the spiritual world, and which reveals your soul. So, can sound do that?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about sound just for a minute before we talk about the mantra. Where in our world today, either high tech or medium tech, do we find sound revealing something that we can't see with our eyes?
The news.
You're about to score bigger points.
In water, the vibration.
Vibration of
The water
water,
drop.
okay. And you're saying in the news? Okay, yeah. How about in the world of technology, have you heard of ultrasound? How many have heard that? Okay. Ultrasound shows what's in the body. You can't see. For instance, when someone is pregnant and then they apply an ultrasound to the belly of the mother, then they can see the image of the child, right? How do they see it? It's right in the name of the technology. Sound, ultrasound. And the ocean, if you look into the ocean, it looks like it's void. You just look at the surface and you'll see your reflection. And even looking into the water, there's so much particulate matter, you can't see very far. But if you use what? Sonar. Anybody here live on the ocean? You use sonar. You can see all the forms in the water. So in a similar way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that sound is revealing of our higher self. And when you use this sound technology, which is spiritual, it's a spiritual sound technology, then your soul becomes revealed. And not only your soul, but also the source of your soul. And that's really what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said is the ultimate experience. Is to see not just yourself, but the source of yourself. And when you see your connection to that original divine source, that's where real joy comes from. So he said, within this technology, you use music, you use rhythm, and you use what's called mantra. And the mantra then reveals your higher self, reveals your original divine source, and you can see your connection between yourself and your divine source. And this is a state called yoga. Yoga means to connect with the Supreme. It's cognate with the word yoke in English. Yoke means to connect two things together. So he said, if you want direct access to this experience and to feel it for yourself at any time and any place, no matter where you live, you can sing the mantra. And so he called this process Sankirtan. He said this is universal, doesn't matter what culture you come from. If you sing the mantra and you add a little bit of rhythm and music to it, then this will be a process for enlightenment. And you can employ that anywhere. And there are several other tenets that one could add into one's life, but this is the main process that he taught. And he said if you add this chanting of the mantra, singing of the mantra together, then you'll notice that everything in your life will transform and become spiritualized, and also it gives you a kind of spiritual insight into your higher self. And you can even see the difference between your body and yourself by the chanting. And that gives you a foundation upon which you can interact with the world without becoming entangled in it. What do you think? Are you buying all this? Okay. Let's see if you have any reflections. A reflection is not a question. A question has a question mark at the end and I have to answer it. But a reflection just means something you heard out of the monologue that stuck in your mind that you feel was something valid or perhaps usable in your own life that might be helpful to you. One thing you wrote, stick in your pocket. When you walk out and Gopal Champu grabs you by the arm out there and says, what did you learn in there? One thing that you'll say. Better to figure it out now because he's out there.
Mind and body are things.
Can you come in? Let Braj Mohan come in. That's about letting the sun into the room. There's a space over here, also, wherever you like. Okay, what did you hear? Who had their, yes?
Mind and body are things.
The mind and body are things. 99.9% of people in the world says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita don't know that. If you know it, you're in a very special category called a liberated person. To know the difference between you and the body and mind. The way he put it in the Bhagavad Gita, the way he puts it is in the Sanskrit. Kshetra gnam shapimam viti sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetra gnayo jnanam yatach jnanam matam mama. He describes the body as a field, like an agricultural field. In the time of agrarian culture, people will get an acre of land and they cultivate it and grow all their own food. So he said, your body is like that, it's a field. And then he called you the Kshetra Gya. So this word Gya, say Gya. Gya. There's a really strange word in English that used to bug me when I was a kid. Can you guess what it is? No, you can't. Okay, it's the word know. How do you spell know? N-O, right? That's what I thought. And they said, no, K-N-O-W. That's also no. I was like, what? You have any rules around here? So it comes from Sanskrit, the word know. To know something, to have knowledge of it, to have direct experience, to know it, to see it for what it is. This comes from the word gyan. And shortened it's gya. So when you say Kshetra Gya, you're saying that you're not the field, but you are the... Work with me, people. You're not the field, but you are the... knower of the field. You're the knower of the field. That's profound, actually. And it's a very high concept. And when I miss it, it's like doing a mathematical test. And you start off on the wrong foot. Have you ever done that? Start off by saying the simple calculation, because it just starts with addition. But then it advances into algebra and trigonometry, and then you get into calculus. And it's one big long equation. Any mathematicians in here? Hey, I had a feeling. Nice to meet you. So, you start off with 2 plus 2 equals 5. And then you do everything else right after that. How does the scorer, what's your score at the end? You miss the whole point. So this is a foundational aspect of any spiritual practice or any attempt at aligning oneself in happiness in the world. If I miss this equation, doesn't matter if I add skyscraper buildings. What else we have here in New York? Name 5 things we have.
Big bridges.
Big bridges.
Tunnels.
Liberty.
Graffiti. Okay, what else?
Tunnels.
tunnels,
Parks.
parks,
Rats.
rats. Let's hear it for our friends the rats. So, you can have unlimited things, but if you miss the equation in the beginning, then it's on a weak foundation, it will crumble. So your point is the most important. To start with this understanding of kshetra, which means what? For 20 points.
Feel.
Correct. And kshetra gya.
No.
And what's the word? Why gya, by the way, is actually odd in Sanskrit to the, somebody who reads and speaks English, because it's spelled J, N with a squiggle over it, and an A, and that's like nya, like nya, 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 nya. You have to say nya. Most people say, they try to read it for the first time, and they say janana. Just like in English, I might look at no and I go kano. No, nope, wrong. It's no, and it's also gyan. So gyan, it's a very interesting word, because if you think about how do we know things, how do we perceive, we do because we're conscious, and we look at matter and we can observe it, and we can even assume shapes of matter like we are now. We have material bodies. By meditating on matter, then we can start to become like matter. We can enter into matter. We can start identifying very deeply, right? If you look at a material thing and you think, that's me. Like, have you ever gone shopping and someone trying a few hats and they go, oh, that's really you. And it's like, yeah, that's me. I got a hat. Or your car is like, oh yeah, look at me. You drive like this, lean out the window. Actually, like 2 fingers. You're driving, you think, yeah, so, and then someone hits you and you go, you hit me. Because you're so identified with the car. There's millions of cars in New York City. Half of them probably are getting hit every day, and we don't care. But when it's our car, we care, because we identify with matter. That's our prerogative as souls. We can meditate on anything and enter into it. That's how powerful we are. So when we understand the difference between ourselves and our bodies, they become kshetra gya, the knower of the field. Then we have a foundation to work on, an equation to work on, where everything else will then fall into place in the right way. Boy, I sure gave a long extrapolation on a very simple principle that you gave, so I won't do that anymore. I'll limit myself to 1 minute. Okay, any other reflections? No, you're afraid. Okay, go ahead.
The shelf life of the mind and the body is temporary, but if we engage it, we can get full credit.
That's right. It's from the doctrine. 55 seconds. It's from the doctrine of preemptive giving. That if you wait till the possessions you have, including your body and mind, are unceremoniously taken from you, then you don't get any credit. But if you preemptively give them in service to the divine, and you offer them, you get full credit. That's an amazing deal. You can turn something temporary that isn't yours into something eternal where you get full credit. Or you can just let the clock run out and say, we're taking this back now, and you're hapless. Finished in 45 seconds. Okay, 2 more reflections. Yes?
I like the point about the number line. You're in negative numbers in debt, and you get to 0, like the void, and then you have your positive.
Very practical, isn't it? So Chaitanya, it's the only way it works for me. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said there's 3 paths in life. One is the path of trying to get as much as you can in the material world, try to get comfortable, and good luck with that, because it never works. Or giving up the world and saying, I renounce everything, which is ludicrous because it's not ours to renounce. And then the 3rd path is called the path of dedication. And the path of dedication means that whatever I have in my purview, I use it in service to the Supreme. That's the path, he said, that works for everybody, everywhere, at every time. And you'll be completely happy and your whole life will transform. and you'll have enlightened engagement with the world. Okay, let's try one more. Yes?
I like the point you mentioned how sound vibration, it's a technology.
Sound vibration is technology.
But it helps us to connect to our own selves.
It helps us to connect to our higher selves. See if I can tell you a quick story. I was doing a little research about sound to write something about it in a sort of comprehensive way, in a way that would compare sound to various technologies that we have. And I came across, of all places, it's an article I came across about a place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Anybody? Shout out for our friends in Minnesota. So, Minnesota, it's a recording studio. A lot of famous musicians go there, but they had a little extra cash lying around. So they decided they'd build an attraction, which is a soundless chamber. It's next to the music studio, hopefully. Otherwise, the music's not going to come out so nicely. So in this soundless chamber, there are negative decibels. Sound is measured in decibels, right? Say yes.
Yeah.
And so there's negative decibels. So once you go in and you close the door, then you can't hear yourself breathe, you can't hear your footfall, you can't hear any noise. And the two reporters who extensively wrote about it lasted in there. One of them lasted about 20 minutes, which was really long, and the other one was more like 15. The world record, I think, was 50 minutes. Nobody can stand it in there. Because they said, and both of them, independent writers, they both said the same thing: it's the loudest place on earth. Because we already have sound within us that's accumulated from our experience in the world. It's stored in our subtle body or our subconscious mind. And when you eliminate all other distractions from the outside world, the noise that comes from within us is profound. And so we need to have a sound vibration that will resonate with our higher self. Otherwise, all the noise blocks out our access to hearing ourselves, seeing the Supreme. And therefore, the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was about the superior sound vibration that comes from the spiritual stratum. You can reach through to the fourth dimension through sound. And when you take in that sound and you create it, you change your soundscape in your life. Like every movie has its own soundscape. That's how you can tell what era it's about. And even silent movies from the old days, they weren't silent. They all had music. In the beginning, there would be an organ or piano player because people couldn't stand just watching a picture with no sound. So they would play dramatic music when the chase scene was going on. And nowadays, if you look at a movie, you'll notice that it has a soundtrack. And every one of us has a soundtrack in our life. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, check out your soundtrack. All right, last point.
Yeah, I like what you say about that at some point on spiritual practice, you can actually see yourself as separate from the body.
Yes, by spiritual practice, there is a way in which you can come to see for yourself that you're separate from the body, and you'll notice that the body is going on like a dishwasher. Anybody here have a dishwasher at home? If not, I'll come over and help you out. Really good at it. Just got to get me a little brush. But the dishwasher, it's automatic. You put in all the dishes, push the button, close the door, then you hear a whirring sound, and it goes through cycles, right? Same with your body. You'll notice that, you eat something, goes through the cycle. It's like, what's going on? I don't know, I'm busy. It's all the activities in my body are going on. I have no idea what's going on. In fact, people who study the kidney or the liver or the stomach, they have some idea, but not that much. If you ask them, like, what's wrong with me? Most of the time they say, well, we really don't know, but try this anyway. And we do the best we can, but it's really a mystery. It's a mystery machine that's given to us by the material nature, and it's uncanny. And we can actually see through spiritual practice the difference between us as non-material entities, conscious beings, and the non-conscious body that we animate by our being within the body. And that's a state which is described in the Bhagavad Gita in a very long verse, which I won't recite right now, because we're going to sing for a couple of minutes. All right? So this is called the mantra for deliverance, and I'll say the 2 words at a time, and please repeat. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna,
Krishna Krishna,
Hare Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Rama Rama,
Rama Rama,
Hare Hare.
Hare Hare.
Do we have a harmonium player here? Yes? So don't play harmonium. We're just going to clap our hands. And this is a simple way, because if you don't have instruments and you're not musical, you may think, if we have a lot of instrumentation, you might think, well, I have to be a musician to do this. You don't. You can chant this mantra anywhere, with yourself, with your pet. Pets like this. And you can chant it with your family, and bring your friends over, and read a little Bhagavad Gita and chant this mantra by clapping your hands. So the way Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught it was, one person would sing the mantra, and the other people would repeat. So I volunteer to sing it. And then you listen and repeat. Shall we try it?
Yes.
Then what we'll do, after we do it, just a cappella, no instruments, no clapping. Then we'll add clapping. Then we'll add this tambourine. Then we'll add that drum. Then we'll add the harmonium at the end. And we'll just see how it builds. And then we have cowbell. Play the cowbell.
More cowbell.
More cowbell. I have 2 cowbells, so I could say that all the time, more cowbell. All right, here we go. I'll just start singing, and then you repeat, and then we'll gradually add in the instruments. And if anybody freaks out, Gopal Champa's out there. We have a special room for you. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh, sorry, no clapping yet. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Just listen. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Did you want to chant more?
Yeah.
That's good. So when you get home, what I recommend is go to the kitchen and test out your pots. It works best with wooden spoons, But you can find there's a lot of music in your kitchen. You take a couple of pots down, if you have any ceramic cups and things like that, you put them around, you can distribute them to your family. And get one of these things going. Start with a cappella, and then clap hands, and then start tapping on some of the cups, and find the ones that are in the best tune, and then get the bigger pots, and start like tapping them with the wooden spoon. Does this sound good? Fun for the whole family. So, yeah, you can do that, or you can get yourself a tambourine, or any kind of drum, bongo, if you had a bongo, that's good. And get a little chanting group together. And if you have a little chanting group in your home, or you want to go out to a park, that's how you start a Hare Krishna movement. You know how to start a Hare Krishna movement? Be careful. You go to the park and you just find a place, anywhere. It doesn't matter. There's no time, place, or circumstance. You can just sit there and just start chanting. And miracles will happen. The mantra is miracle. In fact, that's how the Hare Krishna movement started. One person came here and sat under a tree. The tree's still there at Thompson Square Park, and chanted. So the mantra will transform your life. The simple principles that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you can all read about in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. And just add it to your life. Don't worry about where you're at now. And think, I have this habit, that habit, I'm too busy. It's okay, it doesn't matter. Anywhere you start, even if it's one tiny molecule of practice every day, it'll expand. It always does, and it always will. And you'll notice that your whole life will fill up gradually with this simple practice, and become happy, and you'll run faster, jump higher, you'll feel satisfied, and you'll have something to share with others that's a lot more joyful than the 24-hour news cycle, I guarantee you. Thank you very much, everybody, for living here in New York and sharing your spiritual joy with everybody else. Please be kind to all living beings. Everyone's feeling depressed these days because of the way the world's going. So if you can help bring them up, give them a little encouragement, and give them a little spiritual impetus, then they'll thank you for it. Maybe later, but they will someday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Now,
it's over. That's all, folks.
Showing our appreciation and gratitude to His Grace Vaisesika. We're going to have a petition signed to try to bring him back more.
Wild horses couldn't keep you away.
Okay. So this is our Bhakti School program. The best way to show appreciation is to tell a friend. So yes, I see many new faces here. Yes, we have this every Tuesday, and we also have Saturday night kirtan. Happens every Saturday at 7 p.m. So you just got a little taste of it for the kirtan, a little taste of kirtan. We do a couple hours of kirtan every Saturday night. It's a nice program to join. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube. These classes are recorded and they're posted on YouTube at Bhakti School NYC. So you can find us there. We also have a newsletter now that you can subscribe to as well.
How did they do that?
And you can see me for more details.
Give them your contact info so you can be in touch.
And now we'll have a nice vegetarian snack. It's a kind of snack and a dinner. And there's a little donation basket. You can give 5 or $1 million. Just try to keep it under $1 million because we have our bank account can't withhold so much cash. Thank you all so much.
Damn, I didn't see the tattoo before. This is a tattoo. On my left hand.
so tired.
You ready for some prasada?
Definitely. No, trust me. Yeah.